Hey y'all, Chris here. Now, I know this is my first video and all, but I really wanted to take this time and talk about something that's very important to me personally. Now, I know some of you foreigners might understand my concerns or views on this. You don't really fight for gun rights in the same way that we do here in the States. But maybe this will help you to understand why Americans are, gun happy, as a lot of people like to say. Now, as the title suggests, this video is about two unconstitutional pieces of legislation. I'll get into why they're unconstitutional in a bit, but these pieces are the National Firearms Act, or the NFA, of 1934, and the Hughes Amendment of 1986. Now, I know some of you might not know what these are, or what they regulate or ban, so I'll go ahead and I'll summarize for you. Now, the NFA is a tax on our rights. If you want to own a shotgun or a rifle with a short barrel, a fully automatic weapon, a silencer, or a destructive device, which would be most explosives or artillery pieces, you must first find someone who can even sell them. The ability to even sell these things is now massively restricted and very costly to do so. Once you do that, you have to fill out paperwork to send it into the ATF, or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which is the second most useless organization on the planet, behind only the UN, for them to review. This is where you're forced to pay a $200 stamp fee, which is basically you paying the government for your rights. Now that you've done all this, which can take some time in order to fully fill out all this paperwork and stuff, the ATF now processes your paperwork, which can take between 1 month to 6 months, depending on the form. Silencers, for example, are 6 months minimum. All of these forms can take up to a year to fill out, however. Now, without the ATF in the way, regular folks could easily stock and quickly sell any of these devices at their leisure, with only basic background checks being implemented into their purchase. I'm not against background checks at all, to ensure that the person purchasing weapons isn't a felon or doesn't have a long history of violence. Now, some people might say that without the NFA, this is just going to mean criminals will be able to purchase these things much more easily. But criminals are already getting them, and use pistols most often anyways, vastly outnumbering any assault rifle in use in killings. It's a law-abiding citizen that's being charged and denied their rights because of criminals. Now, the Hughes Amendment is much simpler. It's a ban from owning any fully automatic firearm created after May 19th, 1986. This means that you cannot purchase any modern machine gun if it's been made after this date. Now, I know a lot of people might think that all this is fine, that putting a ban on explosives should be perfectly understandable, and it's not even a ban. You can still purchase them, it's just expensive and restrictive, and owning a modern machine gun is completely unnecessary. I'm here to tell you that's not how things work here. That placing a tax on our rights and restricting those rights in any capacity is against the highest laws of our land, our Constitution, and our Bill of Rights. We have the Second Amendment as a failsafe against tyranny and government overstep. If our First Amendment fails, if our legal actions that we can take against our government fails, if they oppress us and refuse to let up, we have this right to challenge them militarily. We have a right to revolution here, where if 2/3 of the nation want a new government, we get a new government. If they refuse to listen to that, we have the ability, thanks to the foresight of our founding fathers, knowing that any government can turn tyrannical, to fight back and take our nation back. It's how we became a nation in the first place, by fighting an oppressive power and defeating them. A restriction on this means that we cannot have the ability to challenge our government equally. Even if we can't outright do it right now, we should still have the chance to be able to do so. We should have every right to fully defend ourselves and our freedoms from any power, be they foreign or domestic. There was a Supreme Court case, Grosjean v. American Press Co., in 1936. Grosjean had placed a tax on newspapers being sold so long as the newspaper had a circulation of over 20,000. It was unanimously decided by the Supreme Court that the tax was unconstitutional and was summarily shut down. Now, how is this tax on our ability to own certain firearms or weapons, or accessories in some cases, constitutional when it places a tax on our Second Amendment rights, yet it's deemed unconstitutional and goes against the founders' intent to place taxes on newspapers with a relatively high circulation rate at the time in 1936. Now, I use the term founders' intent, and it was a specific term used by the Supreme Court in this ruling. What it entails is the intent of the wording and rules in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and what the founders meant by them. Some people have argued that the founders would have never imagined the weapons of today. And that may be right, but that doesn't stop the Constitution from protecting your free speech on a cell phone, now does it? We've had inventors churn out things that were better than anything the military had, and provided to the public first. At the time of the signing of the Bill of Rights, it was common for individuals, companies, and groups of people to own and operate artillery pieces, the most devastating weapons of the time. Ships were outfitted with cannons quite often and did international trade for profit completely separate from the government in their entirety. The first breech-loading rifles, now a breech-loading rifle is you fire, flip a lever, place a paper cartridge in, flip the lever back up, ready to fire. That's a breech loader. These were Ferguson rifles. Now, they're in use during the Revolutionary War, and were even used in combat against George Washington himself. There were multi-barreled cannons in use before the Revolution. You unscrew a stop in the back, rotate the barrel, screw it back in, and fire. A cannon. A cannon. Even after the Revolutionary War, it was commonly known in practice that private arms sales were not to be regulated by the government. Inventors were constantly churning out advances in firearms technology, from the Colt revolver to the Henry rifle to the Gatling gun. And some of the greatest gun inventors in the world that changed firearm technology forever, men like John Browning, Samuel Colt, and Richard Jordan Gatling, were all able to produce what they did because of the level of freedom allowed to them here in the States. All of these weapons were available to the public before they were adopted or used by any military force. To suggest that it would now be illegal to build a new Maxim gun and purchase it on the civilian market because the Founding Fathers couldn't possibly guess that it could ever exist when the most devastating weapons of the time were widely available during the signing of the Constitution, and some of the greatest firearms ever designed were made throughout our nation's history and widely sold on the civilian market, is quite frankly ludicrous and incredibly imaginative. Now, a lot of people try to argue that the Second Amendment, I've got that on the screen right here as it was written whenever it was signed, it can only apply when you're a part of a militia. Now, the First Amendment covers your free speech, your free expression, your freedom of religion, and the freedom of the press. It doesn't exclusively cover your free speech and expression when you're talking about religion in the press. Now, there's a lot of debate about the Second Amendment because it's worded so differently. There aren't ors thrown about within it. It doesn't specifically state that no legislation shall not be written. However, we need to look at the founders' intent. That comma is used to separate clauses, which, when joined with empirical evidence of individual ownership of firearms separate from any militia and without express written permission from the government to be able to do so, should lead anyone with more than 3 brain cells to understand the founders' intent on this. The last part of the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed, means that you can't tell us how far this right can extend. There's no limit, plain and simple. Any limit on this right is strictly unconstitutional. Now, the reason I'm making this video is simple. The NFA and the Hughes Amendment are direct infringements on our Second Amendment rights. The Supreme Court has deemed it unconstitutional to tax our rights, and it's ludicrous to ever think that it would be possible to ban any aspect of them. As these things are against our rights as American citizens and only remove power from law-abiding citizens, these 2 pieces of legislation need to be replaced. Now, there's a way we can go about this. With Trump in office and a Republican Senate and House, we stand the best chance to remove these things now. In the description below, there are links to be able to find your local Senate and House representatives. I would suggest you call them or email them at least once a week and express your want to have these things removed. link them this video if you want so they can see the thought process behind the argument. But you need to be vocal. They need to feel the fire beneath their asses. We voted in a man who's never been a politician to the highest office of the land. They need to know that we're sick of them ignoring us. And if it doesn't stop, they will be replaced. Now be polite when talking to them. It's not going to do you or anyone else any good to cuss or be rude to them in any way. Just state your desires firmly and thank them for their time at the end. It's time we got our freedoms back. All of them. And it's time we stopped accepting government overreach. A small government is a better government. Now, to you foreigners that might be watching, this might seem like a lot of yank nonsense. There's something you must understand about America, though. We're a very young nation, less than 300 years old, and yet we're the world's superpower. We have almost a quarter of the world GDP. We have the strongest military to the point where we can tell any other nuclear-capable nation what they can and cannot do, and that country will listen and obey. Our culture has reached every nation across the globe to some capacity, and we survived everything from a central split to our people, to coups, to invasion, to the Great Depression, and come out of it all as powerful and influential as we are now. Less than 300 years old, and all this. We're obviously doing something right over here, and restricting our rights and freedoms will only hamper our ability to progress further than we already have. Our freedoms are what allow us to advance so fast and so far. Acting more like your nation will only hold us back. Now, I'm not telling you to like everything about us. We certainly don't like everything about you. But you just need to understand that our culture here is different, that we go about things differently, and because of that difference, we've advanced as far and as fast as we have to become the world's superpower, to become the world's leader in GDP. Less than 300 years. I want to thank you guys for watching. This one, I really just wanted to get this one out. It's very personal to me. Expect lighthearted content for the next video. I know this one's pretty heavy, especially for a first video. This is just, like I said, really, really important to me. I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time.